Hello everyone, this is part 26 of What If Naruto was born in the Uzumaki clan, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Yahiko had been chilling outside the fort alongside a few Kiri ninjas, namely Ao and Chojuro, when he first caught sight of the king coming out with Kisame right by his side. It was midnight and even the moon was hidden behind the dark clouds, but none of the men on guard duty failed to recognize the bright red hair of the king. They also didn't miss his stony face or the cold fury in his eyes, making them all give him a wide berth. Ignoring caution, Yahiko left his comrades and approached his friend, who had not spared anyone else even a glance, but stopped on seeing Yahiko approach by his side. "What's happening?" asked Yahiko quickly, seeing Naruto dressed in battle gear. He glanced at Kisame, who was also ready, and so were the other 24 northern soldiers following the king. "I received word moments ago from my Zetsu spies within Iwa's camp. Onoki is about to attack our allied forces near Omegakure at dawn with his entire force." They had by now approached the place where Konan was standing ready with dozens of paper birds. She also didn't miss the immense fury in his eyes, but was the only one who knew it was not just Onoki's actions alone that caused it. "Then I'm coming too," said Yahiko seriously. Omegakure was his home and he had to be there when Hanzo faced the entire Iwa army. "You think I was going to let you stay?" Yahiko chuckled at Naruto's sarcastic question and sent a determined nod in Konan's way, who returned the gesture. Quickly leaving the king, Yahiko ran towards the nearby paper bird. Soon the 24 northern soldiers also started getting on their paper birds under the watchful eye of Kisame. That left Konan alone with the king, whose face showed not a single emotion other than dangerous fury. "She refused, didn't she?" she asked quietly, earning a sharp look from him. "Yes," he confessed. Short and cryptic was his voice, barely above a whisper. "What will you do now?" asked Konan hesitantly, quite aware of his condition of having both her and Akeno in his life or none at all. But he had always been unpredictable, and that worried her. "My duty." He was about to turn back to the men in order to make sure they were already set on the paper birds when Konan grabbed his collar and shoved him in the shadow of the largest bird. Her eyes barely holding back the sea of anger burning deep in her H. "Answer me," she whispered, her voice so cold that it sent a shiver down his own angry H. "I don't know." She was about to turn around and walk away, disappointed with his choice and the uncertainty he was putting her life through. She loved him dearly, but he had to be certain, which he was not. But his hand grabbed her wrist and roughly made her turn back, shoveling her back against the paper bird. It was then she looked in his eyes and saw the pain, desperation, hope, and fury. All visible so clearly in those deep blues that momentarily froze her own anger. "I don't know what to do, but what I am sure is that I cannot live without you," he confessed, looking her right in the eye. "And her?" asked Konan seriously. This time his eyes turned as cold as the northern winter, which made her shiver. "She made her choice, and I will respect it, but I am not going to suffer for the rest of my just because of her. But I need your help," he said softly, resting his forehead against hers as their breaths clashed. "You're going back on your condition?" she asked amusedly, and this time he blushed. "Yes." He waited for her to laugh at his foolishness, to scold him, but she only brought her hands to cup his cheeks. "Then you're mine now, just as I am yours. Now and always," she whispered, looking intently in his eyes, and saw the relief along with joy in his eyes. "I promise." He kissed her lips fiercely, and this time she whole H returned the gesture. Part of Konan was happy that she would not have to share his affection. She would not have hesitated even if Akeno had agreed, because of what Naruto was to her. With him, she didn't have to pretend. She could be herself. With him, she could fight wars and rule a kingdom, helping him in creating legacies they both could be proud of. A future so vast and bright that it would overshadow the dark pasts. And together, they would improve the lives of not just the people of Azu or Am, but those of the North and the entire Union. She smiled into the K-on, feeling the same passion from him as he K her back. Konan knew part of his H would always belong to Akeno, and nothing she could do would ever change that. But there was another part of his H that couldn't live without her. If that was not the case, then he would not be here breaking his own condition, being selfish in his life for the first time. And she loved him for it because he was hers. It was twisted, complicated, up beyond understanding of normal people, but then again neither of them were normal in even the remote sense. When they broke their K, he looked in her eyes and spoke the words that made her love him more. Let us save your homeland, my angel. Akeno had watched him leave the mountain along with his small force from the balcony of her room. She had resisted all her temptations to run to him, to go back on her words knowing nothing would ever be the same again. But she didn't have much faith that all three of them could have made such a unique relationship work. She didn't care about the politics or the personal benefits, she had never desired such things, but what had worried her was the possibility of bitterness developing in anyone's over the years. So, maybe it was better to hurt herself and make him hate her now than hating her in the future. It didn't help that he just dropped the bomb of her real father's truth on her, then went on to reveal his actions with Conan, followed by his future plans for both of them and Akeno as well. She was alarmed when she sensed another presence in the room. Turning back, she saw a mass of paper tags fluttering in the room, which soon enough took the form of Conan. A frown appeared on Akeno's face as she watched the clone of the beauty appear before her, knowing that the real one had gone off with Naruto to war. Akeno had chosen to stay back in order to further not hurt Naruto or make him angry. Especially when he was heading for another great battle. What do you want? Asked Akeno tersely. She and Conan had become good friends after the joint mission against Iwa forces intending to invade But Akeno couldn't help but feel bitter and threatened even as Conan remained unfazed. Is that your final choice? Akeno narrowed her eyes on seeing not a single expression in Conan's eyes. Her face bearing the same stoic mask quite often adopted by Naruto. Conan might now know it herself, but she looked more fit to be by his side than Akeno ever could. The Uzumaki girl could see as to why Naruto fell for Conan first. There was a unique strength in her along with grace, not to forget determination and the iron will to make tough decisions, a proof of which was the destruction of an entire northern city by her hands. That had also been one of the key factors behind the former Kumo army surrendering so quickly, thereby ending one vital part of the war and unifying the north. Why are you here? Asked Akeno tiredly, not in the mood for games. I am here for both of you. But more for his sake, I guess, confessed the Conan clone, earning a raised eyebrow from the silver-haired Uzumaki. What do you really want? The Conan clone glanced at Akeno and saw so many emotions going through the Uzumaki's eyes. You fool, Naruto. She couldn't help but curse the man she loved, for he had no tact when it came to handling emotional situations. He was often a brick, blunt and honest, which while a great quality in other situations but not one in this case. The way he had confessed a whole lot of truths to Akeno was disastrous, and even Conan herself would have been hard-pressed to accept Naruto's offer of a dual marriage. Still, it was Akeno's choice to reject him, and so here she was making one final thing clear. I want him to be truly happy. And a large part of that happiness is dependent on you, confessed Conan. And you think I don't want that? Snapped Akeno furiously, taking one aggressive step, yet it evoked not a single reaction from the stoic, blue-haired girl who stared back at her coldly. No. It was like a sword had been through her making Akeno gasp as her eyes widened. How? Listen to me, Akeno. You're a friend of mine whether you believe it or not, and perhaps in some ways you know him better than me. So tell me honestly, what kind of future you are subjecting him, yourself and Nagato to with your decision? Asked Conan patiently. Akeno had been expecting quite a litany of accusations, but this strange question sent her thoughts astray. What did it even mean? Naruto and Nagato were the best of friends, and in her opinion not much could be affected with her choice. Maybe between her and Naruto, but not Nagato. Her eyes then widened as Conan's true implications came haunting back in her. The three of them, the Golden Trio, had been through hell and back in these past 2 years. But Akeno knew they all had changed, and despite their best efforts some bitterness would always exist, especially in Nagato's over Naruto's actions in the war. Naruto was a warrior and commander, but he would need Nagato, who was the better leader, to maintain the peace across the still new union. And the same was the case for Nagato, who would dearly need Naruto's full support to keep any rebellions from erupting time and again, because there was no way in hell ninja nations would ever accept such peaceful times. After her decision to not be with him, Naruto was definitely going to see her out of his life. It had always been his way to shut things away so that he didn't have to deal with the unbearable pain. In worst case, he would not even acknowledge her anymore, and as much it would hurt her. It would make Nagato furious. These past few months fighting this war together had brought her and Nagato closer than ever, and he had gone out of his way to protect her time and again. That boy would never accept Naruto's just but treatment of her, which could further disturb their much-loved friendship and alliance. Most of all, the Golden Trio would be destroyed. Akeno knew she had always been the peacemaker between the two boys who viewed the world quite differently. Without her, it would all fall apart. And that possibility scared her even more than losing Naruto for the rest of her life. She could try to survive without his love, but losing both her friends would be the end of her. Naruto is an idiot and an absolute brick when it comes to emotional situations. But he loves you more than he'll ever love me. If he loses you, then I'll always have a half-man to live with the rest of my life. I don't want that. More importantly, I don't want to break the Golden Trio and put the future of not just us all but of the Union in danger, pleaded Konan, showing her fears and helplessness for the first time. I hesitated Akeno. What he has asked of you is no small thing, I admit that. But think about all he has done for you his entire life. Those words hit Akeno's like a freight train as memory after memory came running back. Those childhood days when Naruto accompanied her everywhere despite his loner nature, of him giving her birthday gifts even if they were awkward, of him always watching her back on each and every mission. The day when Azu fell, it was he who dragged her away from their burning village when all she wanted was to fight, and it was he who came back for her, risking his own life against Orochimaru and entire Konoha when she was captured, he who didn't hesitate in stepping in the way of Kisam's attack that would have taken her life but ended up costing Naruto an eye. Not for a second had he hesitated and even remained behind against the dangerous swordsman while ordering his clone to take her to safety. She remembered him taking the burden of getting Azu justice, getting her to a Megacore, making sure she and the others were accepted by Hanzo and given a fresh start in life. Of him watching her back during that ambush against Iwa forces, of him keeping her strictly away from any Akatsuki business, of him rushing alone to save the newly discovered Azu survivors, of him promising to look after their clan even if it meant being away from her and Nagato. Of him returning with an entire army and saving her life. By the time she reminisced all those memories, tears had already fallen down her cheeks. Broken, she looked at Conan's clone, who had a distant look of her own in those amber eyes. He has loved you all along without even realizing it, and will continue to do so for the rest of his life even if he shuts you out of his life. I know that he'll never love me as passionately as he loves you, but what I share with him is something which you will never understand. And know this. Akeno froze at the icy tone and the fierce look in Conan's eyes. I love him more than anything in this world. And there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him, promised Konan. And as the Konan clone disappeared, her last words would haunt Akeno Uzumaki for a very long time. And that is my love for him. Is your love even capable to match that? Dawn. As the rays of the morning sun started to pierce through the night sky, did also the sounds of a massive battle reach the ears of the approaching group of soldiers sitting atop their paper birds. Konan tried to hide her scowl, for the battle had begun before they had expected. Either their intel had been faulty or the Tsuchikage had decided to attack earlier. The thought of her countrymen down there against the entire Iwa army worried her. Iwa knew this was the ultimate hour that would determine the fate of their nation. Even under normal circumstances, the stone ninjas were fierce and tough warriors. Now, with their entire nation's future at stake, they would fight with a ferocity never seen before. She glanced around and saw Yahiko shared her worries along with the northern soldiers accompanying them. Kisame remained indifferent, but it could likely due to the fact that the man didn't care about anything except for Naruto's safety and his wishes. As for the king, Naruto's face was cool and composed, never betraying a single emotion. All his anger towards Akeno being suppressed completely, his eyes had the same focus and intensity that terrified his enemies and made him feared across the world. He had his faults, but war was something which he dangerously excelled at. Something for which he had trained his entire life and had lost his innocence for. It was because of that past the king didn't even flinch when he finally got a glimpse of the battlefield. His forces were being decimated. All across the battlefield, Union forces were being butchered by ruthless Iwa forces whose fierce charge was being led by a monstrous monkey beast. A Jinchuriki transformed into full beast mode. Naruto closed his eyes when the monster its massive fist, sending hundreds of Union soldiers sailing hundreds of feet away, very likely to their deaths or something worse. Unsealing a scroll, he took out his gear, ignoring the cries across the battlefield. Off in the distance, huge explosions were happening, and it was there that he felt 3 massive cage-level chakra signatures. It could very well be the location where the Kazekage and Hanzo could be facing off against Onoki himself. But his first priority was securing the battlefield, for they needed their army to survive and not pointlessly at the hands of the Biju and enraged Iwa forces. He first grabbed the ghoulish mask given to him by Kisame and wrapped it around his face. Not only was it strong enough to protect his face from any weapon, but it would also serve to protect him from the poisonous air the Biju was wrecking from its foul mouth. He had already sealed away his crown and adopted the traditional full-sleeved red shirt and green pants of his clan. On top of it was a blue-colored jacket with the Azu symbol on its back. Finally, he took out the unique item which Lord Arima had presented to him on his coronation as king. He could still remember the older man's words when he gave this gift. "You may have ascended far in this world, but this will always tie you to our clan. Wear it proudly across every battlefield." A smile arrived on his face as he stared at the stark white-sleeved haori with high collar that had a very familiar and endearing word etched in bold red at the back. Yondaime, Lord Fourth. Even now, being so far from home and his clan, even when he was now king and had command of a great army, this simple haori with that la on its back gave him strength. It was a stark reminder of who he was fighting for, and most of all where he came from. He was Naruto Uzumaki of Uzushiogakure. Yahiko smiled when Naruto donned that haori and grabbed a very familiar 3-pronged kunai. With his floating bright red hair and icy blue eyes, he was a force to be feared. Konan worriedly noticed his gaze fixed directly on the raging Biju. "You're going to fight that?" she asked uncertainly. Facing cages and armies was one thing. But a full-fledged Biju, only a handful ninjas could do that and survive. He was strong, but still. "I am going to that," he promised. When he turned to face them, all their fears were instantly replaced by a growing hope as they saw the determination in his eyes and the power radiating off him in waves. "Get our forces to retreat 2 kilometers back and reform their lines. Command any surviving Uzumaki to form their strongest barrier ninjutsu up front and wait for my signal to attack," he commanded, as his eyes found his 2 most trusted friends. "Yahiko, Konan. Any questions?" Both Omegakure ninjas shook their heads in negative and with promising nods descended down towards the scattered Union forces, with the entire northern ninja group following after them. That left only Kisame alone with his leader. However, unlike all his battles, Kisame was not smiling this time and was instead focused on the upcoming battle, knowing it would be difficult. Not only were they tasked to deal with a damn-turned Biju, but also a monstrous army at its back that was quite hungry for their bee. "You have a plan?" asked Kisame sarcastically, as he watched the Biju monster started to form a dangerous-looking ball of energy. "Try to keep up." Before Kisame could even finish, the arriving smirk on his lips, a single 3-pronged kunai was sent sailing towards the Iwa forces, which soon multiplied into hundreds of replicas. Naruto had already transformed into a wave of dark smoke and rapidly descended towards the Union side as Konan and Yahiko managed to gather a few Uzumaki who quickly formed a massive barrier. Kisame also lowered his bird to the ground and stepped behind Naruto. They were the only ones standing outside the safety of the barrier against the massive Biju and the even massive Iwa army. A sight which Kisame doubted he would ever forget for the rest of his life. He looked at his friend's back and couldn't help but wonder what was going through his mind. Naruto joined his hands, performing a new set of hand seals as the Biju finished creating a massive chakra bomb and fired. Hundreds of terrified screams echoed across the Union army as the terrified Allied soldiers started taking several steps back from the approaching death. Even the sight of the king standing at the front, or the massive barrier being maintained by the Uzumaki, failed to bolster their confidence. Konan stood her ground on seeing Naruto doing the same as he finished his hand seals and pointed his special kunai forward. Harashin, Darai, Flying Thunder God Technique, Guiding Thunder. Dark engraved markings stretched all across the battlefield in the form of a massive cross as the Bijudama struck. The Union soldiers screamed, fearing the imminent and painful death, but were surprised when before their own eyes the massive ball of foul chakra was absorbed completely in the barrier made by Naruto. Not 2 seconds later, another monstrous explosion followed, along with the screams of thousands of Iwa shinobi as the Bijudama detonated amidst their ranks, courtesy of the hundreds of special kunai unleashed by Naruto. They had tried to get rid of as many of them as they could, knowing how Minato Namikaze had wreaked havoc on Kumo forces in his last stand with those same kunai, but unfortunately their own Jinchuriki had acted hastily and the results were disastrous. The stunned Union forces could only watch in stupor as the Northern King unleashed his sword and raised it in his right hand while holding a 3-pronged kunai in his left hand. Soon enough the ancestral Uzumaki weapon came alive in the flames of hellfire as Naruto turned back to face them. No hesitation, no fear, no confusion. Those were the eyes that looked back at him all. To victory. When he charged forward, he didn't look back to see if anyone followed him, for their ferocious roars were proof enough. He saw Kisame arrive on his left flank, Yahiko on his right along with the Uzumaki fighters. Konan flew above them all on her paper wings as the rest of the Union forces followed after them. Seeing the defiance, the Biju roared and surged forward, shaking the entire battlefield with its might. Naruto gave a quick glance at Konan and pointed towards the Biju as she gave a quick nod, needing no words to understand what her lover wanted. Not that she could even hear a thing amidst the battle cries of thousands of soldiers and a pissed-off Biju that was eager to feast on human meat. Konan raced ahead, surging through the sky at impressive speed. Her hands were raised forward as she created a massive storm of paper tags that started swirling around the giant monkey's head as it roared even more angrily but didn't stop his furious charge. Earth-style uses, on my command, yelled Naruto. From the charging Union army, hundreds of shinobi from different nations ran forward of their comrades already moving through the required set of hand seals. An action performed by Naruto and Yahiko both. Konan glanced back at her lover as he gave an urgent nod, making her clench both of her fists. What happened next lit up the entire battlefield. The giant monkey screamed in pain and fury as the hundreds of paper tags around him exploded in a continuous wave. The Biju felt large chunks of its F being torn apart and it lost its momentum, making it tumble. As the beast flew through the air, casting a massive shadow on the battlefield, Naruto yelled. Now. Doton, Yomi Numa, Earth Release, Swamp of the Underworld. Dozens of kilometers of land that was already soaking wet due to the constant rains prevalent across Omegakure was soon turned into a giant mud swamp into which the massive monkey crashed into. The Iwa forces had already seen the danger their trump card was in as the Union forces closed around the raging beast as it tried to get out of the giant swamp, which made the rock ninjas charge forward. Konan, Yahiko. Counter. Commanded Naruto, pointing towards the approaching thousands of pissed of Iwa ninjas. His 2 loyal friends nodded and led the charge as Naruto turned his attention towards the screaming Biju. It was trapped for now, its own great weight proving counterproductive as it made him sink even deeper into the mud swamp. But it would not hold for long. Sealers, with me, ordered Naruto, as he raced towards the trapped Biju. Now was his chance to end this monster before he could inflict more damage than it already had. Dozens of Uzumaki warriors heeded his call and ran alongside him, only to blown away completely as multiple explosions happened all across the border of the mud swamp, directly preventing Union forces from reaching the trapped Biju. Naruto got up from the ground, brushing off the large C across his cheek that leaked B. Looking around, he saw quite a few of his clansmen had not been so lucky as him because they lay S across the field. His B boiled at the sight high up in the sky. Several dozen Iwa shinobi sitting atop different clay birds were flying all over the Union army, raining down explosives after explosives, dealing heavy casualties. Leading the charge was a bright blonde-haired shinobi that had the look of a madman in his lone eye. Katsu! He yelled, taking down another dozen Union soldiers in a violent explosion. One of the Iwa bombers saw a kunai harmlessly pass by his side, making him smirk at the sheer incompetence of his enemies. Only to freeze a second later as a red-haired monster flashed above him in a dark flash down his burning green sword, thereby cleaving the bomber in half, sending his mutilated corpse down the battlefield. Naruto was quick to jump towards the nearest next bomber as the scream the previous bomber gave before had alerted his comrades. He made quick work of his next target, then throwing another of his special kunai towards the following target. The Iwa bombers were forced to halt their butchering as their own ranks started to get decimated by extremely fast dark flashes. In their haste to eliminate the threat, they released bombs towards the dark flashes' last seen location only to kill their own comrades in AS friendly fire. By the time Deodara turned back in order to see what the commotion was, most of his fellow bombers had been decimated and he came face to face with the Northern King staring down at him icily. The fact that the redhead boy was effortlessly flying by turning his own body into dark smoke served to anger the Iwa bomber. The blonde Iwa shinobi grabbed large clay bombs in his hands only for his opponent to start circling around him in clouds of dark smoke. The unnerving laugh of the boy only served to further infuriate Deodara as his precious art forms were not even able to lay a scratch on the super-fast boy. And that rising anger was Deodara's final mistake. He had already armed another massive round of clay bombs and was about to throw them at his enemies hoping this time they would hit when he felt that very compelling voice whisper in his head. "Why waste that precious art on me? Look at its beauty closely," ordered the voice. In the back of his mind Deodara felt some part of him warning him to refuse, but the new voice in his head was praising his art so devotedly. It was begging him to show the true power of his art to the entire world. Incensed, Deodara started to raise the charged clay bombs high in the air above his head in an effort to show the power of his art when suddenly the timer on those bombs expired and Deodara, nephew to the Tsuchikage, Mad Bomber, became a victim of his own creation as his own head was exploded away in a gory display of bee and brain matter. Naruto remained unfazed as the last bomber's remains hit the ground with a sickening sound. Although he did then notice that the sounds of raging battle had ceased and several dangerous chakra signatures had arrived on the battlefield. The most powerful one being the man who had freed the trapped Biju from the mud swamp and was now floating above the monster. The remaining Iwa army had rallied behind him and it was then did their eyes meet. Naruto couldn't help but frown when he saw Mifune dragging a heavily wounded Kazekage away from the battlefield while Hanzo and Galatea, who both looked wounded, were also panting harshly. His eyes then again connected with the person who was powerful enough to reduce such dangerous warriors to such a state. He had often heard tales of Onoki, the oldest Kage alive, the one who faced both Hashirama and Madara in battle and lived to tell the tale, a leader who gave his nation victory in every war he led, and one considered to be the most dangerous and wise Kage still alive. And that same old man looked extremely as he saw the remains of his own nephew lying gracelessly beneath the ground at Naruto's feet. Things were just about to get a lot more complicated, to say the least. Onoki had met many great shinobi in his life, from the strongest Madara to the noble Hashirama and so many more. Each of those men had a unique strength within him that forever made him immortal in the Tsuchikage's eyes. And despite his rising fury on seeing Deodara's corpse, the Iwa leader was also enraptured with the icy blue eyes that stared at him with such intensity. And a memory came haunting back in his old heart. Flashback. 2 years ago. Onoki stared impassively at the burning village across him along with the screams of men and women, of frightened children watching their family members. It was one which these people brought upon themselves, but was gruesome nonetheless. This was not what he would have done once the defenders were taken care of, but one look at the other two Kage beside him made him stop that dangerous thought. The Reikage and Mizukage were particularly ruthless and any sign of mercy from him would make Iwa appear soft, which Onoki could not afford. And so he could only watch in silence as hundreds of innocent Uzumaki were butchered in front of his eyes. His attention was snapped away from the when a group of their men brought forward the man who started this mess with his dreams of power. He was very young, probably in his early 30s. Sporting the red hair and pale skin prevalent among his clan, his eyes still showing the same defiance despite his village being defeated and he himself standing near death's door. These Uzumaki. Onoki shook his head in disgust when the Mizukage and his group of butchers mocked the disgraced leader, surrounded him and started him playfully with small knives. All the while the Reikage stood silent and uncaring. The gruesome game of tea continued for several long minutes, yet the Uzumaki didn't. He stood defiant and brave, even managing to snap the end of one, grab a knife and K4 more before the Mizukage snarled and viciously the man close to the which finally made Katsuro Uzumaki, Lord Third of Azu, to fall to his knees. Onoki couldn't stand this madness any longer and stepped forward, earning an amused smile from the Mizukage, who was glad someone else decided to join in. The Tsuchikage brushed past the madman and instead knelt before the young man, looking right into his defiant eyes. Rest, son, advised Onoki, taking out a sharp kunai from his pouch. Katsuro Uzumaki stared at the weapon in the old man's hands, knowing what Onoki was offering him was a merciful death in comparison to the long tea the Mizukage wanted to give him. Yet he glared proudly into the Tsuchikage's eyes. The Uzumaki will never forget. Onoki was truly astonished by those words. Despite the burning village around him, despite the death of his army, the ongoing of his people, how could this man say such a thing? Your village is destroyed, Lord Third. Your people and your legacy will soon follow, don't make this any more difficult for them, warned Onoki sternly, but the young man smiled. I made many mistakes, yes, but I saved the best of my people, and I promise you, he will never forget. He loved this family, and he will avenge us, and the last thing you will ever see is an Uzumaki looking down at you as you and your nation promised Katsuro Uzumaki, looking right into Onoki's startled eyes. The Tsuchikage the man in the H and watched the light vanish from his eyes as his body fell to the ground. Yet those words would haunt him for a long time. Flashback end. But now looking into those cold blue eyes, those words said by the Isuzukage were now clear as crystal. Onoki stared at the enemy army and couldn't help but be surprised, for they were standing the ground and rallying not behind a veteran like Hanzo but behind the young redhead boy. No, he was not a boy anymore. He was a king now, the true manifestation of Uzumaki fury, just as Katsuro had promised, those merciless eyes ready to revenge the atrocities committed on his people. Madara had power, Hashirama had a good heart, and Naruto Uzumaki was a man of honor. It was time to test that belief. Let us not have our armies butcher each other needlessly anymore. Fight with me, one-on-one. I am willing to fight for my men, are you willing to do the same? Challenged Onoki, hoping the boy would accept, but all he received in return was a chilling smile. I will fight and KU, Tsuchikage. But I will not spare even a single one of your soldiers after what they did to my people. They have disgraced themselves by innocence of my clan and many women. They will all here, the best thing they can do is fight bravely to regain their lost honor. What I can promise you is that despite their crimes, their families won't be harmed once this is over, said Naruto seriously. Onoki clenched his fists as the boy not only refused to fall for the bait, but he also managed to anger Onoki's ninjas with that declaration, if their shouting and cursing now was any indication. An angry man was an even more reckless soldier, and the Uzumaki knew that. He proved that by raising his flaming sword and pointing it at Onoki and the Iwa army. I, Naruto Uzumaki, King of the North, sentence you all to death for your crimes against Uzushiogakure and its people, as well as your crimes against the Union nations. Onoki could only stare at the boy and the iron strength with which he had said those words, and looking into those blue eyes the Tsuchikage could see the boy would carry out the sentence he announced through his own hands. A pity, for it is you who shall here, replied Onoki, earning a peaceful smile from the young boy. You think my life is something precious to me. If I could trade it for getting my people justice, then I would gladly do so. I grew up as an Tsuchikage. I learned how to long time ago, answered Naruto, as memories of his life came rushing back, reminding him of the fact that never once had he feared his end, no matter how many times he came close to it. Onoki actually gave a small smile. The strength in this boy was truly astonishing. He was not the strongest ninja Onoki ever faced, but perhaps he was the strongest and most honorable man Onoki ever met. Then let us begin, proposed Onoki. Naruto readied his stance, gripping in his hands his sword and special kunai as he stared at his opponent and the monster he commanded. It ends now, Tsuchikage. When Onoki raised his hands and the beast below him roared, Naruto looked back at his friends and comrades. In particular he stared at the ones closest to him, namely Konan, Yahiko, Hanzo, Galatea and Kisame. To his surprise, they and the majority of the allied soldiers were looking at him proudly and gave him confident nods, saying all they wanted to in that simple gesture. Such respect he had never dreamed of receiving in his entire life. Even now, he truly didn't understand what all these thousands of people saw in him apart from his physical power. Hell, He had made so many mistakes in life and war, and there was nothing truly spectacular about him. Yet here they all stood ready to fight beside him. Thank you. He hoped his eyes could convey all his gratefulness to all these people as he turned back to face his opponent and prepared himself for the battle began. Jinten, Genkai Hikuri, Hashira, Dust Release, Detachment of the Primitive World, Pillar. He watched Onoki unleashed an atomic wave at such blinding speed which forced him to turn into dark smoke, thereby evading the attack. Beneath him the Union army was already charging to meet the approaching Iwa forces. He could only hope they could handle themselves under Hanzo's command, for he couldn't help them right now. The beast was about to form another tailed bomb and Naruto knew he could not allow that. So he extended his hand and stretched his conscience towards the ball of anger that was the beast. Conan immediately saw what Naruto was focusing on and also saw Onoki realizing the same thing. As the Tsuchikage moved to intercept the king, the Omegakure Kunoiki rose high in the sky and attacked the old man. Onoki was a very fast flyer even for someone so old as him, a trait he displayed by easily evading all the exploding paper tags Conan continued to detonate around him. However, adding to the cage's frustration was the fact that Conan was even faster than him in flying, as she easily evaded all the dust release attacks gracefully. His eyes searched for the form of Naruto and was shocked on seeing him approach the four tails as the beast started to shrink in size. Impossible. Was the boy able to suppress the turned Jinchuriki? No. Roshi was one of the strongest men Onoki had ever known and he would not yield his control so easily. Then what? The beast. Whatever the boy was doing had either harmed the Biju inside Roshi, or the tailed beast was actually supporting Naruto Uzumaki. And Onoki had to stop that, but only if this damned Kunoiki didn't continue to engage him so eagerly. She was defending the king with such passion. Naruto Uzumaki was a real threat. He unleashed several large earth-sized boulders from his mouth, letting them fly directly towards Conan, who was forced to perform evasive maneuvers. Onoki used that chance to race towards Naruto, flying his old body towards the boy as fast as he could as his hands formed his next move. The boy was in a trance, perhaps his conscience was joined with the beast within Roshi. And that left him quite open for an attack now that Conan was not there to protect him. Jinten, Genkai Hikuri no Jutsu, Dust Release, Detachment of the Primitive World. Onoki formed a sphere in between his palms of his hands which started to become larger and larger. Directing his gaze towards the focused boy, he sent the sphere sailing towards him. This was the end. Only for the Kunoiki to step in between and take the attack on herself. Her panic lasted only a moment as she was surrounded in a dome-like structure as the sphere glowed brightly before shattering every single particle within the dome. Onoki gritted his teeth on seeing the real Conan pant harshly as her clone s itself to save the man she loved. Why do you protect him so fiercely, girl? What is he to you? Asked Onoki curiously, as she smirked. He's a wolf and I'm his angel. Onoki saw it then in her eyes, the purest emotion that a human could ever have for another. Love. The Tsuchikage had wondered as to why Naruto had so recklessly just decided to focus on subduing Roshi despite Onoki's presence. Now Onoki understood. He knew she would protect him just like a guardian angel, thought Onoki, and Conan had done exactly that. The cage was brought out of his thoughts when the Biju started to really shrink in size and the foul chakra surrounding Roshi started to rescind within his body. How could this happen? Naruto stared at the giant haired ape before him, who curiously stared down at him. The sage had told us once that someone would come that would show us the way. I didn't believe him then, but I guess the old geezer proved me wrong in the end, said the Biju named Son Goku, earning a smile from the boy before him. You Bijus taught my race that power can either be used for good or evil. Humanity could have tried to learn from your knowledge, but we didn't, and for that I apologize. As a descendant of the sage himself, I release you from the S my race has subjugated you to. Go and live free, knowing that you have taught my race the lesson the sage wanted you to teach us. I'll make sure that none of my kind comes looking for any Biju, you have my word, promised Naruto sincerely. What about the Kyuubi? As much as that stupid fox is annoying, he's still a brother, hinted Son Goku. When my mother's time in this world comes to an end, the fox will join his true family. Your other brothers and sisters have agreed to reanimate in the north under the Shinji Mountains. They are quite vast and men do not wander there. As the ruler of the north, I'll seal that place away and forbid anyone from approaching so that you all shall live in peace. But I'll leave the seal open from your side so that if someday humans become worthy of your support and friendship, then you all can come back, explained Naruto briefly, remembering his agreement with few of the Biju he had freed. They had promised that their other siblings would be told about this when they felt their presence again taking form. He didn't know how those beasts would make it work, but he had to trust them. If things failed, then he would deal with the situation later. He had to lay faith in them when his own kind had broken that same faith time and again by either beasts. Son Goku stared at him in surprise for a long moment before speaking. You really mean it all, don't you? Even the noble Hashirama us despite his good heart. What makes you different? How can I believe you won't go back on your word? Asked Son Goku skeptically. Naruto nodded as he brought his hand forward, willing the skin to be open from the palm as he extended the B hand towards the Biju. A oath? Asked Son Goku in shock. I, Naruto Uzumaki, descendant of Rikido Sennin, king of the north, pledge my life and those of my descendants to protecting the lives of all Biju and keeping them safe from humanity. Go, you're free now, said Naruto with a smile, as he felt the giant monkey touch his large fist on the B hand. I never thought this day would truly come. Uzumaki. Naruto, you are man of honor and the savior. The sage promised my kind, said Son Goku in shock, as he started fighting against Roshi's control and blocking the Jinchuriki from using his chakra. The North will remember, Son Goku. The Biju smiled for the first time in centuries as his form started to vanish from the landscape and he stared at the boy who had shown there was still hope for humanity despite all they had done to their own world and the Biju. Thank you, Uzumaki Naruto. And I don't know about my brothers or sisters, but I promise you this. If a day comes when the wolves of the north truly need help, I shall answer the call, promised Son Goku. Naruto was shocked on hearing that promise from such a powerful Oni, knowing just what it must have taken Son Goku to say that, ignoring all the atrocity humanity had done on him, and so the king gave a respectful bow as the beast disappeared with a smile on his face. Arigato, Son Goku. Onoki was left frozen by the sight before him. The giant monkey was less than half of its original size and it was now kneeling before the Uzumaki boy with what appeared to be a smile. Even both armies momentarily stopped their fighting to watch this spectacular sight. Not one of the men and women able to grasp how could such a monster kneel before this boy. Naruto gave a respectful nod before plunging his flaming sword right inside the beast's head. The giant ape didn't scream even as the flames of hellfire started consuming its large body, it only fell gracefully to the ground with a thunderous crash that echoed long and wide across the entire battlefield. What happened next changed everything forever. Onoki gasped when his army started to turn back and flee. The death of their Jinchuriki, who was their only trump card, broke what little courage the Iwa soldiers had. Onoki yelled at his soldiers to stand the ground. Barely half of his army stopped, but the rest of the cowards didn't care and continued running. Disappointed and heartbroken over such betrayal, the Tsuchikage realized it was truly over now. His nation. He had known half of his army was comprised of barely trained civilian bandits and thugs or mercenaries supplied by the daimyo. And those cowards had not hesitated for even a second to flee, uncaring that a Wagakur would fall if they didn't win here. Only the remaining half that were true Iwa shinobi knew what was at stake and had decided to stand the ground. But it would not be enough, certainly not with Roshi's now if that flaming corpse was any proof. He looked at the battlefield and saw his forces that were still standing were being surrounded by Union forces under the expert command of Hanzo Salamander. The heartbroken old man looked back at the boy who destroyed all his hopes and couldn't help but wonder. What did the boy have in him that made this possible? Naruto Uzumaki was not a monstrous fighter like Hashirama or Madara, nor was he politically shrewd like Tobirama or the other Kages. Even his war strategy had its fair share of great success and disastrous failures. He was so ordinary, and yet now the new world stood united behind him. How could he still win after all that? You really don't understand, do you, Tsuchikage? Asked Konan calmly. Onoki looked back at the girl who stared at him with pity, and he was so heartbroken he didn't even have the desire to scold her for that. How? He asked tiredly. Because he made us all love him. All he wanted in life was to look after his family and loved ones, something which most humans desire. Sometimes the world doesn't need great leaders, but just someone who can understand what ordinary people truly want in life, explained Conan briefly. And what is that? Asked Onoki with a frown. To live happily with their families. The world is tired of constant warfare caused by the ninja nations under the orders and greed of petty feudal lords. Naruto never promised anyone great riches or glory, all he promised was to give the people of this world a chance to make a new start and try to live peacefully. Instead of fulfilling one's wish through conquer, he just offered a way to achieve the same thing through alliances and negotiations. We all wanted the same thing for decades, and he was the one who showed us the way. And most of all, he is a man of honor. Even after Kumo and Kiri butchered his people, that man didn't return the same act in kind. He punished the soldiers who committed war crimes but spared the ones who were following orders. Never once did he harm any civilians of either nations despite those very same nations butchering hundreds of Uzumaki. He tried to offer Konoha peace despite everything. What makes him different from the rest of the cage is the fact that he truly cares for the people as if they were his own family. Their lives matter to him, unlike your great nations who never hesitated to kill their own soldiers and civilians for their own greed, explained Conan seriously, earning a snarl from the old man. Honor. It's fear and power that keeps the peace, foolish girl, spat Onoki furiously, these children. And yet here we stand. Those words said by the girl were like as right to Onoki's H as he saw half of his army fleeing like be cowards. Their actions betraying Onoki's philosophy instantly, while the Union army had never once tried to flee even when they were being butchered by Roshi in his beast form. Those Union soldiers had fought bravely and rallied wholeheartedly when Naruto Uzumaki arrived. They were still fighting fearlessly, which was a stark contrast to Onoki's forces. He looked at the boy who was still looking back at him with that grim face of his. There was no gloating or arrogance in those eyes even as he saw Onoki's men fleeing or getting s. His eyes were like ice, observing everything with a heavy silence. The boy should be laughing or enjoying on seeing the soldiers who butchered his people now facing the same fate themselves. Yet all Onoki saw in those eyes was grim acceptance. Let us end this, Tsuchikage, proposed Naruto calmly. Conan glanced back at the man she loved and saw him give her a grateful smile for watching his back. However, now he was stepping back into the fight and she respectfully stepped behind him, ready to support him if need be but willing to let him fight his own battle, knowing this was important for him. Onoki didn't miss the level of understanding between these two or the respect they gave to each other. It was rare to see that among people, much less among ninjas. The air turned cold when Naruto unleashed his dark chakra fully and raced towards the old cage in the form of dark smoke. Onoki raised his hands and started forming his next dust release move when from amidst the charging dark smoke was unleashed a single three-pronged kunai. Realizing the danger, the Tsuchikage, instead of aiming at the coming smoke, took aim at the lone kunai racing forward. He fired off a powerful beam of dust release only to see the kunai get destroyed, but not before it multiplied into dozens more replicas. All of whom now sailed past the Tsuchikage. Onoki saw rapid dark flashes and was about to substitute himself with anything nearby in order to get out of this trap. Those dark flashes were happening even faster than before, and with them came the rapid S from his enemy's kunai. Onoki grunted in pain over and over before he felt one final painful S right into his H. The old man coughed B as Naruto Uzumaki appeared before him in the form of dark smoke. For Lord Third, he whispered, making Onoki's eyes go wide. How could this child remember he was the one who killed the previous Uzukage? But when he glanced in Naruto's eyes and felt the presence in his despaired mind, he knew why. You think your ideals will truly create a future. This is the ninja world, boy, cursed Onoki, as Naruto prevented him from falling down to his death as the old man's body started to fall apart from the wounds sustained. I don't know, Tsuchikage. But I will fight for that future for as long as I live, promised Naruto. So young and naive, mocked Onoki, earning a smile from the redhead boy. Maybe, but it is our era now. Sir with honor here, said Naruto sincerely. My people don't make them pay for my mistakes, requested Onoki, as he felt darkness approaching. It hurt his pride immensely to even ask such a thing, but he didn't have anything left to lose. If his words could save the lives of even a few, then they were words well spent. Naruto's eyes softened on hearing that request. At least this Kage was not totally uncaring about the fate of his people, unlike the others he had faced before. No innocents shall be harmed and your nation shall not burn. I promise. Onoki's skin had turned deathly pale, showing his true old age even as a smile came on his dry lips. A man of honor, ha. Never thought I'd see one. Naruto closed his eyes when the old man in his arms breathed his last. He carefully lowered them both to the ground and respectfully placed the body of the fallen warrior on the ground. He couldn't help but look at this old man. He should hate this man even now that he was but Onoki, despite his crimes, had proven himself a better Kage and a better man than either the Raikage or Mizukage. Not only did Onoki give Katsuro a merciful death, something which Naruto was thankful for, but this old man truly cared for his people and nation, unlike the other two Kages who had just been power-hungry and sadistic. Konan came beside him and gently entwined her hand with his. Thank you for watching my back and saying those words. Even if I don't deserve half of that praise, he said with a smile, earning a mock glare from her. I said what I truly believed. Hi. Konan faintly smiled on his clumsiness but didn't say anything further. We will kill all the Iwa soldiers. I cannot accept their surrender knowing they kill my people. But as for the civilian fighters and mercenaries who just fled, let them go, he commanded, shocking his lover as she glared at him. Naruto, you. None of those men and women kill my people, it was Iwa soldiers and they will pay for their crimes. But I cannot butcher every civilian fighter for trying to defend their nation. If they try to attack our forces then none shall be spared, but for now let them go. We have shed enough blood in this war, Konan. And if we are to have a future we'll need living people for that and not a sea of corpses, explained Naruto patiently. Is this because of Onoki? Asked Konan with a sigh, knowing Naruto's morals and his way of thinking was the opposite of hers. She loved him for it, but at times like this it also made her quite skeptical of his choices. He remained silent for a long moment, only staring at Onoki's corpse before turning towards the raging battlefield where the last of Iwa ninjas were making their final stand. If I butcher everyone then I am even worse than the Kages IK. I have a choice to set a different example here in this ninja world that has always known treachery, butchery and And I have made my choice. He joined the battle again after saying those words, leaving Konan to wonder. Despite loving him, she could not understand many of his choices and this was one of them. Granted, the civilian fighters didn't stand any chance against the highly trained and organized Union forces, but tactically it was best if they were all killed before they ever became a threat. Maybe they would hide now, but what about the future? Would the people of Iwagakure simply accept their nation being taken over by foreign powers? Granted, they wouldn't have much of a say in that, and it could just be her cynical mind. But Konan also knew he thought differently than her. Where she acted with her mind, he acted with his Naruto had always felt the weight behind every life he took as an and every life he couldn't save despite his best efforts. There were moments in his life when his anger sometimes prevented him from seeing that, but Konan knew he cared for other people's lives and what those people meant to their families. This war had changed him, just like it had changed the rest of them all. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.